Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Bible in Life podcast. My name is John Whitaker. I am the host and creator of the Bible in Life, and I want to welcome you to this episode. I was looking over, particularly for the listener's commentary, but even for the Bible in Life podcast, just looking over some of the stats, particularly of countries where people are listening, and it just is always so striking to me how many different countries are represented there. And obviously United States, but then like on the listener's commentary here last week, there were hundreds of downloads from Vietnam. There's always a few downloads in Vietnam. Last week there were hundreds of downloads of the listener's commentary in Vietnam. That just really struck me. And when I look through the list, you just scroll over the course of a month, and 100, 115, some crazy number of countries like that. 120 countries or something. I'm not even totally sure the exact amount. It would be a lot to count. And in some of those countries, it's just 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 listens in a month. Some, it's hundreds of listens in a month. But what it represents is people all over the world who are learning the Bible, listening to the Bible, being stirred up in their faith through this medium of a podcast. And that is something that is really encouraging to me, deeply humbling that the Lord is using this podcast and this means, modern technology, to help encourage people in their faith. And it just makes me incredibly grateful. So I am super grateful for you, wherever you're listening from. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere and hope you're having a great summer. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, wherever you're at, hope you're hanging in there through winter. And really grateful that we can all be together in this venue to think about the Bible, think about Jesus, think about our faith, and think about what it means to follow Jesus. And that's really our heart, our goal here on the Bible in Life, is to provide some biblical teaching and reflection and thoughtfulness aimed at not only helping us understand the Bible, learn it, but also help us live it out. That's the goal, to learn and live the Bible. And so, welcome. Glad you're here. On this episode, I just want to add a little reflection to something I wrote in the monthly email newsletter for the month of June. So if you get that newsletter and you read it, you might have seen the little personal note from me there. If you're not on my email list but would like to be, so you get monthly updates and thoughts from me, you can just go to johnwhitaker.net and subscribe on there. You'll actually get access also to a free ebook called Bible in Life that gives some tips for learning and living the Bible. It'll put you on my email list. I try to send out an email every month. Don't always succeed at that. But this month, for the month of June, I wrote a little personal note of something that has just been on my mind. I feel like the Lord has been reminding me that following Jesus is not really complicated. And the reason I think this has struck me so much is I have spent a ton of my life in the academic realm, where, people write articles, they write blogs, they write books. New books are coming out with new ideas and new thoughts. And, if you're going to be in touch in the academic realm, you need to keep up with the latest scholarship. So you got to read some of these new books. And there's just always new information and new thoughts. And it's not that it's all bad. Certainly it's not. A lot of it is helpful. And if I could show you, my office right now, you could see my bookshelf, and it's got a bunch of books on it. I don't know how many are there, and I've reduced the number of books that I have probably by 50% over the last 10 years. And that stuff's helpful. And I get emails from various scholars or thinkers on their Substack or their blog, and there's just a lot of information and a lot of stuff. And I've always been fascinated by the conversation around discipleship to Jesus, spiritual formation. So I've got lots of books on that, big books, small books. I subscribe to Substacks that where people share their thoughts on that. And again, while it's not certainly bad, and a lot of it is helpful, one of the things it can easily do is create the impression that this is really complicated. This is really confusing. Like following Jesus and becoming like Jesus. Man, there's just like, you got to write a 400-page academic book on this, or you got to keep writing Substacks on this because it's really complicated and it's really confusing. And again, that stuff's not bad, but sometimes it's really helpful just to step back from it all and to remember that the essence of the thing is not complicated and it's not confusing. And so I feel like the Lord has just been reminding me of that when I read, various books on spiritual growth or spiritual formation, or I read various blogs on spiritual growth and spiritual formation, and I read some articles, sometimes it feels like, man, are we making this more complicated and confusing than it needs to be? Sometimes I feel like we've almost added this whole dimension of psychology to it that, again, it's not bad. Some of it is really helpful. But the essence of the thing is not really all that complicated. Now, it's hard. Following Jesus is difficult in that it takes effort. It takes discipline. It takes intentionality. It takes regular commitment. It entails self-awareness and self-honesty so that we can confess, so that we can allow the Spirit to show us where we fall short and not be defensive. So it's not easy, but it's also not complicated and confusing. And so in my little personal note in my June newsletter, I boiled it down to this. I said that really spiritual growth, following Jesus, comes down to two things. It comes down to devotion and obedience. Devotion to Jesus and obedience to Jesus. That's really the essence of spiritual growth. Cultivate devotion, practice obedience. Now, what does that involve? What does that mean? And just a few thoughts on that. Again, I think if we're going to boil that down to the essence of the thing, these two are right at the heart of it. And what devotion entails is, devotion entails love and loyalty to Jesus. You love him and are loyal to him. And that's essentially what it means, that in our steadfast, loyal love to Jesus, we are devoted to him. And then the other part, obedience, that should be pretty clear. That simply means doing what Jesus said. That's the essence of it. We're devoted to him with steadfast, loyal love, and we do what he says. We obey him. And that's really the essence of what it means to follow Jesus. And Jesus himself, in fact, actually brings these twin ideas together. Again, I think simplifying things and clarifying things at the end of his ministry, right before his crucifixion, the night before his crucifixion, Jesus is spending the evening celebrating Passover with his closest friends, his disciples, in the upper room. And in kind of classic form, right? It's the night before your crucifixion. Everything's going to change. The next day is going to get really hard for these people. You're about to die. Let's reduce it down to the essentials, the main things. And in doing so, Jesus actually brings these twin ideas of steadfast, loyal love, devotion, and obedience together. John chapter 14, verse 15, Jesus says very succinctly and very simply, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments. If you're devoted to me, you will do what I say." Devotion and obedience. If you love me, Jesus says, then it'll show up in doing what I say, keeping my instructions, following what I tell you to do. He says it again just a little bit later in John chapter 14 in this conversation with his closest friends there in the upper room. John 14:21, he says, "The one who has my commandments," that is, the one who has my words, my instructions, my teachings, and keeps them, does them. That's the idea of keep, right? The one who has my teachings and does them, that's the one who loves me. That's John 14, verse 21. And the one who loves me, he goes on to say, will be loved by my Father, and I will love him, and I'll reveal myself to him. Do you want to know Jesus? Do you want to see him and hear him and experience him? Well, then do what he says as an expression of your devotion, your steadfast, loyal love to him. The one who does that, Jesus says, I'll reveal myself to him. That we'll be united together in love, and because of that, I know that I can show myself to you, and it'll be received well. Or John chapter 14, verse 24, the one who doesn't love me doesn't follow my words. So if you don't love Jesus, you won't do what he says. And the word which you hear is not mine, but it's the Father who sent me. So Jesus' teachings ultimately come from God, and so to obey Jesus is to obey God. Or on the same night, in the same conversation, this time a little bit later in the evening, Jesus says this in John 15. This is in the context of the section where Jesus says, abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear much fruit, so neither can you unless you abide in me. So in that context, in John chapter 15, verses 9 and 10, here's what Jesus says. Just as the Father has loved me, so also I have loved you. Now that always gets me. Like, to the same depth and the same degree, with the same faithfulness, the same heart that God the Father has loved Jesus, Jesus says, that's how I have loved you. Then he says, remain or abide in my love. Stay committed, stay like abiding in me, abiding in my love. What does that entail? Well, verse 10 says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. I've loved you the same way the Father has loved me, and if you do what I say, then you'll be rooted in my love. You will be united to my love. You will keep yourself in the flow of my love. You will experience the continual expression of an outpouring and goodness of my love if you simply do what I say. Now, that's just a logical and experiential reality. It's going to be really hard for you to experience and receive Jesus' love if you're outside of the realm where Jesus is operating by virtue of his teachings. Just as, say, a teenager or a 20-something child who has spurned the teaching and instructions of their parents and is doing things that they know their parents would never approve of, doing things that is completely contrary to the wise way of life their parents tried to teach them. They're doing their own things. They're now outside the sphere where their parents' love is operational. And there's going to be friction and tension and difficulty there. And there's going to be, not that their parents don't love them anymore, but they're going to they're not remaining in their parents' love, and they're going to have a really difficult time experiencing their parents' love, right? Well, it's the same sort of thing. But on the flip side, Jesus says, but if you actually keep my commandments, do what I say, you're going to abide in my love, in the experience of my love. My love will be your daily experience because you're doing what I say. And then he says, just as I've kept my Father's commandments, remain in his love. It was the same for Jesus. By doing what God said, he remained right there, united with the Father's love. These twin things, steadfast, loyal love, devotion, and obedience. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's really the essence of spiritual growth. And so that reminder that has been just on my mind of late, just clarifies some things and simplifies some things. And yes, there's lots to consider, and sure, some of these blogs are helpful, but let's not get the impression that it's really super complicated. It's a matter of being devoted to Jesus and obeying Jesus. That's the essence of following Jesus. All right, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Bible in Life podcast. The Bible in Life podcast is made possible by the generosity of dozens and dozens of people just like you. So thanks a ton to each of you who make this podcast possible. I am super grateful for you. So to all of you, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you, and may He grant you peace. I hope you have a wonderful week in Christ. God bless you guys. I look forward to talking with you again.